I'm Vera. Sitting here in this old farmhouse, looking out at the soybean fields where fireflies blink slowly in the summer night, I'm reminded of the storm that tore through my life. It all came to a head in the courtroom, where my daughter, Lily, stood before the judge, her face pale and drawn. The judge's words echoed through the room as he read the charges against her and her husband, Jake. Fraud, conspiracy, the very words that had shattered my family. It all started on a seemingly ordinary Thursday night. I was in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes as I did every night. The fireflies were out on the back porch, their soft glow a familiar and comforting sight. We'd lived in this farmhouse for 30 years, and every summer, the fireflies came back, a constant in our ever-changing world. My husband, Henry, had been a hard-working farmer all his life. He'd toiled in these fields since long before I met him. He was a quiet man, a man of few words but deep love. That night, he came up behind me and turned off the faucet. It was the first thing that felt strange. Henry never interrupted me when I was doing the dishes. He said it was the one time of day I looked truly at peace. Vera, he said, using my full name the way he did when something was serious. I turned around and looked at him. He'd lost a lot of weight in the past few months. Cancer had been eating away at him, but that night, his eyes were sharp, clearer than they'd been in weeks. I need you to listen to me carefully, he said. And promise me you won't ask questions until I'm finished. I dried my hands on the dish towel and nodded. He pulled out a small envelope from his shirt pocket. Inside was a handwritten note with account numbers, the name of a bank in Cincinnati, and a combination I didn't recognize. That's everything, he said. 35 years of what we built. I moved it all last Tuesday. It's in your name now, under the trust your cousin, Mark, helped me set up in April. I stared at the paper, trying to make sense of it all. Mark was an estate attorney. He'd visited in April, and Henry had told me it was just a friendly call. Why? I blurted out, breaking the promise I'd just made. He looked out the window at the dark fields for a moment. Because our daughter has been talking to people she shouldn't be talking to. I love her, but I love you more. He squeezed my hand, then went back to his recliner and turned on the evening news as if nothing had happened. That Sunday morning, just as the church bells a few miles away started ringing, Henry passed away. Grief hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't the quiet, dignified thing people talk about at funerals. It was dropping the phone when the hospice nurse called, standing in the kitchen for half an hour holding a coffee mug I'd forgotten to fill, and folding Henry's shirts because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. On Tuesday, Lily came back to the house. She brought Jake with her, and a man in a black suit I'd never seen before. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of me that I hadn't touched. They came in through the side door without even knocking. Mom, Lily said, her voice measured and rehearsed. This is Mr. Thompson. He's a probate attorney. Mr. Thompson set a leather folder on the kitchen table. Henry had been in the ground for only 48 hours. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Thompson said, I'm sorry for your loss. I want to handle this as gently as possible, but there are some time-sensitive matters regarding Henry's estate that we need to address. I looked at Lily. She was looking at the folder, not at me. What kind of matters? I asked. Jake, who had eaten my cooking every Christmas for 10 years and had borrowed money from us without ever repaying it, crossed his arms and leaned against the refrigerator like he owned the place. We had a will drawn up, Lily said. Daddy signed it in the presence of witnesses. It supersedes the trust. The word supersedes coming from my 60-year-old daughter, a schoolteacher, on the second day of her father's death, was like a slap in the face. Sweetheart, I said slowly, your father and I set up a trust together. We know about the trust, Mr. Thompson said, opening the folder. But this document, dated 6 weeks ago, was signed by Henry in the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary. It indicates his primary wish was for the farmland and all affiliated accounts to pass jointly to his daughter and son-in-law, with you retaining rights to the house and a monthly allowance. An allowance? After 35 years of building this life together, I was to receive an allowance? I set my teacup down carefully and looked at Lily, at Jake, and at Mr. Thompson with his leather folder. I thought about the fireflies outside. The farmland was worth $3 million. A developer from Columbus had been circling it for 2 years, offering more each time. Henry had always refused, saying the land was a record of his life, of every early morning he'd spent in the fields, every callus on his hands. I asked to see the signature. Mr. Thompson slid it across the table. I looked at it for a long time. Henry had beautiful handwriting. Years of filling out farm ledgers and tax forms had given him a slow, deliberate cursive that I could recognize anywhere. The signature on that document looked like a man struggling to write. He was on pain medication 6 weeks ago, I said. He was lucid, Jake said from the refrigerator. He was on 3 medications, including a fentanyl patch, I said. I have the pharmacy receipts and the hospice nurse's notes, and I know my husband's handwriting. The room got quiet. Lily looked at me for the first time since she'd walked in. There was a look on her face that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't guilt exactly, more like a moment of doubt. Mom, I'd like you to leave, I said. All 3 of you. Today. I called Mark that afternoon. He drove up from Dayton the next morning and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of my coffee. I told him everything. He didn't say much at first. Mark had always been a calm, steady person. When I finished, he asked to see the document they'd brought. I'd kept it. Mr. Thompson had left me a copy, probably thinking it would intimidate me into cooperating. Mark looked at it for a long time. This notary stamp, he said. Crestview Notary Services. Do you know this firm? I didn't. He wrote it down. Then he asked me about the trust when it was set up, where the accounts were, who had handled the paperwork. I told him everything Henry had told me by the kitchen sink with the fireflies outside. Henry called me in April, Mark said, not looking up from his pad. He told me he had a feeling. He didn't say what about, but he asked me to make sure everything was airtight. He was very specific about one thing. What? I asked. Make sure Vera doesn't need anyone's permission, not for anything. I had to excuse myself then. I went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and stood there for a while. Then I came back and sat down. Okay, I said. Tell me what we do. It took Mark 2 weeks to find what he was looking for. The notary service, Crestview Notary Services, had been used only 3 times in the county that year. Once for a routine property transfer, once for a business dissolution, and once for a document signed by a terminally ill man on a Wednesday afternoon while his wife was at the pharmacy picking up his prescriptions. The witnesses listed on the document were Jake's brother and a woman named Laura, who turned out to be his college roommate's wife. Neither of them had ever spent much time with Henry. One had met him once at a cookout 5 summers ago. The hospice agency provided records. On the day of the signing, Henry's pain levels had been documented as severe. The nurse's notes, written before anyone knew they would matter in court, described him as intermittently responsive and experiencing significant cognitive fog due to medication adjustment. A handwriting expert examined the signature. He testified later that in his professional opinion, the signature showed signs of guided assistance, meaning someone had very likely steadied or directed Henry's hand. When I heard that, I wasn't just angry. There was a deeper grief, a grief shaped by the knowledge that Henry's hand at the end of his life had been used against his own wishes by the people he'd loved and provided for. Lily hired her own attorney when she realized Mark wasn't going to back down. There were depositions, and for about 6 weeks I didn't speak to her at all. Jake sent me a letter, saying I was destroying the family over money, that Henry would be ashamed of me, and that all they'd ever wanted was what was fair. I read that letter 3 times and then put it in the folder with all the other documents. The court proceedings took 4 months. I won't go through every detail, but the judge found that the document Lily had presented was signed under conditions that did not meet the legal standard for testamentary capacity in our state. The witnesses had clear conflicts of interest. The notary service was registered to a holding company with connections to a real estate firm that had been in contact with Jake about the farmland months before Henry died. Jake was charged with fraud. His brother was charged as a co-conspirator. Lily was charged with filing a fraudulent legal instrument. She pled guilty to a lesser count in exchange for cooperation. She received probation, community service, and a fine she'll be paying for years. Jake received 20 months in prison. The farm is still mine. I had an offer from the Columbus developer again last spring, but I turned it down, just like Henry always did. I'm not ready to make that decision yet, and I may never be. Some mornings, I walk out to the fence line where the soybean field meets the old creek bed and think about what Henry said that Thursday night. I don't know if Lily and I will ever find our way back to each other. Some days I think we might, and some days I walk past her bedroom with the same pink curtains I put up when she was 15 and close the door, not wanting to think about it. Grief has taken so much from me. Not just Henry, but the family I thought I had. But Henry, in his quiet, methodical way, had prepared me. He'd looked ahead and made sure I'd be standing when the storm passed. A truly good man loves you all the way to the end and, if he can, just a little further. I still do the dishes every night. When I'm done, I look out at the back porch. The fireflies come back every summer, blinking slow and gold over Henry's fields. I leave the porch light off so I can see them better.